Welcome to Igniting the Spark. I'm your host, Stephanie James. I'm so delighted today to have this very special guest with me. So thrilled to have you, Henry Shukman. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. And I'm really happy to be with you and of course with all your listeners. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. Boy, we were just talking right before this about your book, and we're going to be talking about this amazing book. I'm going to hold it up for those of you that are seeing this on video. This Original Love, The Four Ends on the Path of Awakening. And we're going to dive into this book. But first of all, Henry, you have such an interesting story, and your personal story of awakening is so special. Would you be willing to share a little bit of that journey?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of always sort of fun and touching to revisit it actually for myself. I grew up with um, very severe eczema, a skin condition that was, I mean, I know many have it and it can be just a rash or something, but in my case, it was all over my body from the age of 6 months. And until my mid late 20s, and I was often hospitalized. And so it was really quite a traumatic thing to grow up with. But I always had a curiosity about sort of about life, and I was a poet from a young age, and and a would-be kind of traveler. I really wanted to see the world, and I wanted to um, be able to write about it. And I'd love these Chinese poets from way back, eighth, ninth centuries, who had been these wandering poets who would meditate and write beautiful poems about lost friends and about the landscapes they were in, and were, really sort of exploring life very deeply and exploring this world. And they kind of inspired me. And when I was 18/19, I had a gap year between school and college, and I went to work on a ranch actually in Argentina, where one of my father's colleagues was from. My dad was a professor at Oxford University, where I grew up. And out there in South America, my skin got better. Actually, for the 6 months I was there, it cleared up. I'm sure it was some combination of diet, climate, and also just being out of the rather difficult home environment I'd grown up in as well. And my nervous system started to get happier, and I also wrote a book, my first book, while I was there. I worked there and I backpacked through Bolivia as well. And towards the end of the trip, I was on a beach, feeling very happy. I'd written my book, at least the first draft. I didn't yet know how much more work there really was involved in producing a book, but I'd done a first draft. I was healthy in my body, in my mind, in my skin, and in my heart. And I was all alone on this beach watching the sun set. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the scene that was in front of me somehow became part of me, or I became part of it. Somehow the gap, the separation between me and what I was experiencing disappeared, and I just became part of everything. And this was a very kind of concrete, clear, really powerful experience. It wasn't some idea. It was an absolute certainty that I just had never been separate from this world, and it was tremendously healing. It was an amazing sense of belonging that it brought. And also it brought up a great sense of love, of as if there was some ageless love that was holding everything, and that I was part of that, as was everything. And it was really incredibly beautiful. And, kind of sort of the peak of it sort of passed. And then I knew again that I was this person on a beach, you know. But it seemed like somehow even then there was this, it's as if I was part of a great dream, you know, that this world was being dreamed into existence or something by I don't know what, you know. But anyway, it was a very powerful, tremendously beautiful and healing experience. Um, but I had no idea what it was. I had no interest in, you know, mysticism or spirituality. I'd been brought up totally rational, logical, empirical, you know, in Oxford, which is a, you know, thoroughly sort of logical, rational kind of a place, you know, and I all I knew was that somehow it was true, and it was kind of more true than the way I ordinarily experience things. I kind of just felt very certain about that. And I also had this feeling that my life had been fulfilled suddenly by this experience, and that I actually could die happily, even then at the age of 19, knowing that my life had been a complete success in some way. You know, of course I didn't die, luckily, you know, and um but then a few weeks later, I went home and I was in this very sort of open state, you know, from as a result of that experience. And almost as soon as I got home, I was kind of overwhelmed by the unhappiness that I had actually grown up with, you know, both because of my skin and also because of the troubled family situation, you know, that I'd grown up in. And in that state of great openness, um, it was kind of overwhelming. And I think I was sort of re-traumatized actually. And it was very, very difficult. I was really in despair for a few years. I mean, I managed to kind of get through, you know, the tasks before me. I went to college, got my degree, and I started a postgraduate degree, but I was really unhappy. You know, I was kind of dragging myself through life. Um, and 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 then I then I luckily got into meditation at the age of 24. I started doing transcendental meditation, which was the only commonly known kind of meditation in London in the late 80s when this is. And, you know, the Beatles had done it, which seemed to give it some stamp of approval, you know. And they had a actually it was quite expensive, but they had an incredible offer for graduate students, which I then was. So I got trained in it, and it was really a tremendously good thing that I did, because I started to heal. You know, I started to calm down a bit. I'd been very anxious and pretty depressed on and off. And then I started, because I think the meditation was kind of softening me. So then I started doing therapy. I joined a really nice therapy group of young people that met on a Saturday morning with a really unusual, dynamic, maverick therapist, actually from California, who was a very interesting guy called Harvey, who was great for all of us. And, you know, so the healing journey really began. And in time, that took me to sort of revisiting this, what had happened in that experience, and what could one make of it? Was there further to go? And indeed, I think I found there was. I pursued a path of, I mean, along with my life and my career and relationships, and of course finding Claire, my wife, and getting married. Along with that, I was always meditating, you know, and kind of developing, I think, in the path of both healing and awakening, which I think are very, very closely connected. They're not maybe exactly the same. I think you kind of can do one without the other, but it's much smarter to do both, I think, you know.
Well, and there's this beautiful, thing that you speak about, which is truly it's the duality. You had this awakening, and yet then you're back in the real world. And I think that that is an experience that can happen to all of us. We have this amazing connection and get to peer through the curtain of Oz, if you will, and we get to see like, oh my gosh, it is all one. We are all one. I can, I see that truth now. And then we come back into ourselves and go, oh, but I'm living in this very messy, sometimes painful or traumatic human experience. And the piece that is also beautiful to me is that as you begin meditating, that was the piece that helped crack you open, so to speak, even further, to allow things to soften, allow that light to get in, so that then you are open to doing even more healing.
Yeah.
Will you talk a little bit more too about, I think there's still to this day, there's kind of this misnomer that you become awakened and then you're enlightened, or you become awakened and then that's it and life is breezy.
Yeah, yeah. The way I see it is that there are various sort of thresholds that we can go through. Um, just having a glimpse of that glorious, boundless oneness is an amazing thing, and we're absolutely blessed if we get a glimpse of that. But for most of us, exactly, we'll just, we having seen that, it's after the ecstasy, the laundry, in
Yeah.
the title of Jack Cornfield's book. It totally is. But what I think is possible, and I do believe this, is that with continued practice and training, and I was really lucky to find some teachers, who were profoundly helpful, different ones at different times, and but kept me on the path of training and as well as just daily meditation. And I did find at a certain point something else happened where some major piece of difficulty kind of did dislodge and was kind of swept away. And it's not an absolute thing. I mean, it wasn't like all my trauma circuitry was gone. I could never get triggered again. No, but my relationship to it dramatically changed, actually. And so it became much more accessible that to contact, something vast and clear, boundless love, I would say, or a boundless awareness, perhaps. That became much more accessible, but by no means did I always do it. But it was just that if I thought of it, I could do it. But meanwhile, I got better at allowing whatever difficult feelings might be coming up to be present. I didn't kind of freak out about having difficult feelings, anything like as much as I used to do, if you know what I mean. I became more receptive, more welcoming, a more kind of whole person, basically, is what I mean. I'm still on the path. It's not done by no means. But I there was a shift, a really decisive shift at a certain point in my own path, which was not that experience as on the beach, but much later in my mid 40s, deep in a Zen retreat, actually. Something really, really did sort of, something decisive seemed to kind of fall away. And I felt in the world in a way I had never had before, actually. It was like, it was almost like, it was a little bit like, well, I hesitate to say this, but it was sort of something almost like dying and being reborn. It was, I mean, that's rather charged language, I know, but I was present and in a way that was just different. And that stayed with me a long time. Things move on and it's a little different now, but but it did get easier. It really did. But not that I would say, I've got no idea what true enlightenment might be like. I have no idea.
Well, and I do believe, I've said several times, I think we have several incarnations in this incarnation.
I love that.
So when I hear that, that resonates so much that there's different parts of us, different awarenesses, different energies that perhaps have been held, cellularly within us. And as we continue these practices, those do begin to fall away, which opens up, it's giving me the chills because for me, it's that feeling of like wanting to be as clear a conduit as possible for as much love and healing to come through. And so all of a sudden, some of those old parts, or like I'll call them cobwebs,
Yeah.
begin to be swept away. And then we're a clearer channel for this new life, this new love, divine love to come through.
Oh, that's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, I can totally resonate with that. It seems like it just gets easier to let the energy of lovingness just flow. And part of that, I mean, on my journey has been something to do with, I mean, this might sound a bit counterintuitive, but with letting my heart break. There's something about heartbreak that I've found, the few times in the course of my life, to really not fight it and to let heartbreak happen has led me to a more open heart. And sometimes it feels like there's not a lot of resistance left, that whatever needs to come through by way of, compassionate energy and loving energy doesn't get blocked so easily. I
Well,
hope,
and
I
that's
mean,
so beautiful. Yes. I mean, and I think that's it. And you referred to this earlier, how you would allow yourself to be with whatever emotions would come up. And we start to be able to have the capacity to befriend those emotions and not just resist or push them away, where they really do get further lodged in our bodies.
yeah,
And so, when you say that thing about it reminds me of Elizabeth Lesser's book, Broken Open, that it's those parts of us when we really allow that brokenness that I think in our culture so much, we're trying to avoid that. We're distracting ourselves by whatever means possible. And yet, when we're just with it, with the brokenness, with the brokenheartedness,
yes.
that is where, for me as well, in my own experience, incredible transmutation, transformation has happened.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And, in a way, I mean, in this new book, what I'm trying to share with people is a path to be able to do that more, and I'm my sort of, my invitation is to view meditation that way, because a lot of people, it's great that so many more people are meditating, it is terrific. And a lot of people think of it primarily as stress reduction, which is great. It certainly is that. But if it's also, and so a lot of people are like that I interact with, in my role as a meditation teacher is commonly, why can't I get my mind to stay on the breath or something, And I'm saying, well, hold on, there's much more. Just be with, allow, welcome, and just let your experience be as it is and let that be your meditation. And that can become, a path of great releasing and opening to more and more. So it's it's actually a path of growth by almost doing less in meditation, more just being with and allowing, and then we might grow and open in ways we didn't know were possible, and it's also much more restful than, dang, I got to try and keep my mind on the breath or something.
Right.
Uh,
Well, and if you will talk about too, Henry, the title of this book, Original Love, because that's kind of the ultimate experience that begins to happen as we tap into this. And I guess, for the listeners, what is your definition of original love?
yeah, okay, thanks so much. I mean, the most sort of daring way I'd put it is that in some way, you know, all of this experience we're having, being alive, being human, human heart, human mind, human body, is actually, and the world that we're in is all somehow is pouring out of a source. There's an utter mystery, but it's emerging at all is a kind of giant act of love. So it's an original love because it's the origin of everything.